All right. Okay, all right. The date, December 6th, 1925. The time, approximately about 2:30 in the afternoon. There were no tickets available, believe me. The teams, the Chicago Bears, New York Giants, maybe you've heard of them. The place, the Polo Grounds. Quite possibly, and this is going to be a long one. So if this might be a long one, all right? So if you're a little tired, you might want to get a pillow out, get a blanket, curl up, maybe get a book ready or whatever, because this video could be a little lengthy. This is quite possibly the game that saved the New York Giants, period, bar none, end of story. Hey. I got a lot of stuff to read here, but one of the problems that the teams had back in the 20s and even in the early 30s with the depression coming on was money. Now, it's not really much of a problem nowadays. I mean, it is to a little degree, but I mean, with television rights and, revenue and all of that, each team gets a slice of the pie. Here's whatever. Here's a couple $100 million for you, whatever million for you. You know what I mean? So every team's getting money regardless. I mean, if the stadium's whatever, only 3/4 full, they're making money. Right, you got 70,000, 80,000 seat stadium, and say there's only 60,000 in there, they're making money, right? And with the television revenue and all that stuff, that teams are making money. It wasn't like that. There's no television revenue back then. So one of the problems was, like the Giants had, as many other teams had, was money, trying to pay their players. Obviously, what the Giants had a lot, their problem was they played their first 2 games on the road. The next 9 games were at home. The last game of the season, they played the Bears at Wrigley Field, but 9 games were at home. So you might think that'd be pretty cool. The problem is each team that came in was guaranteed a certain amount of money. And for a lot of what I'm reading, it's like around $2,500. And you're like, oh, $2,500. I got that in my bank account. I can pay. You know what I mean? Let's see. Let's pick a game here, shall we? Yes, of course. All right, here we go. November 8th, the Columbus Tigers. Right, wasn't a big game. This, that, and the other thing. Possibly around 4,000 people showed up for that. Now, the Columbus Tigers were quite possibly guaranteed $2,500. Now, the ticket prices varied anywhere from 50 cents to $1.10. I think to $2.20 and then to $2.75. And those and when I say attendance, there's 4,000 people probably in attendance. However, out of those 4,000, maybe 3,000 actually paid, because what Tim Mara had to do, he was trying to get, he was giving away tickets to get people to come in to try to build up the football brand, the popularity of it. Because back then, college football, boxing, baseball, huge, absolutely huge. The NFL, small. So he had to give away a lot of tickets. So say that one game against the Columbus Tigers, they sold there's 4,000 people. Maybe, let's go crazy, say 3,000 actually paid. Some tickets were 50 cents, some were $1.10, some were $2.20, some were $2.75. But let's say they average about $1, right? Or go crazy. Say 3,000 people paid, and say they wind up making about $4,000. Okay. Now they quite possibly or guaranteed had to give the Columbus Tigers like about $2,500. So they made $4,000. $2,500 goes to the visiting team. Now they have to rent out the Polo Grounds. I don't know what that costs. It's, sure it wasn't cheap. So possibly the other $1,500, that's gone. Now he's got to pay his players. He's got to pay the coach. He's got to for the uniforms. He has an office. He's got to pay his staff. He's got to pay people to print the tickets and all kinds of stuff. He placing ads in papers. There's all kinds of money. So he was just losing money leftover right now. I saw some instances, or an instance where I saw about $40,000. I saw another instance where it was over $40,000. But a page or so I'm going to read out of here said he was about $45,000 in debt going into this game here. So 10 games into the season, 10 games, about, according to this book here, $45,000 in debt. I'm right. So, but Tim Mara knew he needed a draw, somebody big, and the only one back then who could do this. This guy was like Jesus Christ, Moses, Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson, and Babe Ruth all combined into one. This Red Grange, he was freaking huge. Now, what really the Giants, Tim Mara, possibly us Giant fans, all lucked out was that Red Grange, his final season at college was 1925. He couldn't play professional football and get paid if he was in college. So what he did was he finished his season at Illinois, which ended toward the end of actually I think it was just before Thanksgiving. So it ended like I can't remember the date. But there were so many articles in the papers. It's freaking crazy about Red Grange from Illinois. I mean, we're talking New York papers, and all they're worried about is what Red Grange is doing out in Illinois. So around November 20th, somewhere around there, his college season ended. So what he did, he left school and he turned pro. And I'll tell you, I'm going to go over some stats here, how much money he made. It was freaking crazy, absolutely crazy. So a couple teams, including Tim Mara, the Giants, tried to sign Red Grange because he knew he was such a draw. If Red Grange would just say in 1925, say it was his junior season or whatever, and this was not going to be his final season, right? And he never came out and started playing because Red Grange signed with the Bears, hence this game, right? If he never signed with the Bears, he obviously never would have came. Well, the Bears were going to play in the Polo Grounds regardless, but they wouldn't have drawn that many people. With Red Grange there, they did. So if the Giants, if Red Grange in 1925, if he never came out and played pro football, this might have been another losing cause for Tim Mara, this game here with the Bears. And I'm going to read over a little bit of this book here in just a minute, but he might have lost another, because the Bears definitely were guaranteed a certain amount of money, at least $2,500, maybe even more. Tim Mara might have lost even more money. He might have been up to almost $50,000 in debt. I mean, is he going to hang around for another season of football? I just lost, and this is 1925. This is not 2023. This is 100 years ago. Almost $45,000 going into this game. He was in debt. You think he might, but and also there's another reason why, which I'm going to go over in this book here, why he might not have been able to get rid of the team, but because of this game here, the amount of people that came and paid and the amount of money that was made, Tim Mara and the Giants went from being in the red to being in the black after the game was over, and quite possibly saved the history of the New York Football Giants. Don't ever take this game lightly. I mean, not that anybody lies awake at night. Oh my goodness, December 6th, 1925. What an important day in Giants. I mean, nobody's going to do that. I get it. But December 6th, 1925, a huge, huge day in New York Giants, Football Giants history. Now, where are we at here? Actually, they were known as the Decatur Staleys to begin with. A.E. Staley, he in 1919, A.E. Staley was gearing up for what would be his most prolific decade. The decade 1920 to 1930 would begin with the creation of the Staley Athletic Program and the beginning of the Decatur Staleys Football Club. Let's see here. The 75-year history of the Staley Manufacturing Company suggests several possible reasons. First, he Let's see here. Well, Staley, A.E. Staley, all right, surely must have thought that employees participating in sports, either actively or as spectators, would grow to value the lessons learned of being a team player, good sportsmanship, character building, and as well as building a sense of team factory and loyalty. So this guy, A.E. Staley, all right, he was an entrepreneur with big dreams. He wanted to see the Staley name and product line succeed. What better way to promote the Staley name than by an organized traveling sports team? It is probably safe to say that all of these factors came into play in motivating Staley to begin a company-supported athletic program. So in 1919, because of it was the American Professional Football Association was created in 1920, which in 1922 became the NFL. But in 1919, the Decatur Staleys, that was their first season. And in the summer of 1920, George Halas went out of his way and he was one of the ones. George Halas was one of the ones who helped create the APFA, or was known as the NFL. So in 1920, A.E. Staley asked George Halas to be like to run the team, to be the coach of the team. So George Halas was a player on the Decatur Staleys, and he also was like the coach of the team as well too. After 1920, the Decatur Staleys had a good season. However, the success of the team, they had 10 victories, 1 defeat, and 2 ties. Right? The Decatur Staleys not only had a winning season their first year, which is 1920, but but they came in second place, so they had a really, really good season. All right. The problem was the success of the team and the growing popularity of the sport required Staley to rethink the football program. The problem was Staley saw was one of simple business sense. Limited growth in Decatur, which is about, I don't even know, it's about an hour or so south, maybe a little more, of Chicago. Chicago's like right at the bottom, like Lake Michigan. Well, if you go like an hour or so south in Illinois, you'll get the Decatur. It's about an hour and a half. I'm not exactly sure, 100 miles maybe, just almost directly south of Chicago. But it's in Decatur is in Illinois. So he saw limited growth in Decatur versus the potential for growth in a larger market. Now, A.E. Staley is thinking this because the Staley field that they played at could only accommodate 1,500 seated fans with another 1,000 people standing. So basically, the stadium where they played their football can only accommodate 2,500 people, which is absolutely nothing, right? So the price, and so maybe 2,500 people could show up. The price of the tickets was only $1, and Staley's employees paid half price. And so he had a bunch of employees would go there. So a lot of people who came to the game only paid like 50 cents. So he might have been making maybe $1,500, maybe $2,000, maybe at the most for a game, right? Which was not enough to cover all the costs back then. Let's see. This was combined with the fact that in 1921 seasons, only 2 of their 11 games were played at home. Despite A.E. Staley's immense pride in the team he had created, the popularity of the sport was growing, and the potential growth of the team depended on it being moved to a larger city with a larger venue. Staley found himself in the position of having to make a business decision. Was he in the corn processing business, or was he in the blossoming business of professional sports? So Decatur Staley's team goes to Chicago. Staley met with George Halas and explained the situation and made Halas a proposition he could not refuse. Staley said that the big-time football needed big city crowds, so so it was agreed that in October 1921, the Decatur Staleys would relocate to Chicago and play at Wrigley Field. Bigger venue, more people, right? More money. They would retain the Staley name for one season. The 19 players on the roster would remain on Staley's payroll for the course of that first season, and Staley agreed to pay the team a $5,000 bonus to help with the move to Chicago. George Halas noted that Staley had no legal or moral obligation to promote the continuation of the football club, but Staley was a big man who understood big dreams, and he saw the big potential in the team he had created. Staley would later go on to games up in Chicago when he could, and he referred to the now Chicago team as the Transplants. At the end of the 1921-22 football season, it was time for the Staleys to change their name, because they were supposed to, they were the Decatur Staleys in 1920. They had to move to a bigger venue in 1921. So 1921, they kept the Staley name for one season, but they moved to Chicago, played in Wrigley Field where the Cubs played. So now in 1922, they were in Chicago, but they could change the Staley name. So they were not the Staleys anymore. The end of the 1921-22 football season, it was time for the Staleys to change their name. Given that they were sharing Wrigley Field with the Chicago Cubs, remember, a bear, baby is a cub, right? They decided to call themselves the Bears, arguing tongue-in-cheek that football players are larger in size than baseball players. So the Chicago Cubs, the Chicago Bears, larger in size. So the 1922, the Bears began their first official season. The rest is history. So the Chicago Bears in 1922. That was their the beginning. But they've been around since the beginning. Actually, the Chicago Cardinals, Arizona Cardinals, St. Louis Cardinals, whatever you want to call them, right? The Cardinals and the actually, the Cardinals are the only one to have the official last name or whatever their nickname, whatever, from 1920. But the Bears, one way, form, or the other, were both around the 1920 as well. The Packers came around in 1921. And of course, the Giants came around in 1925. But so I said, so this was, this game here was absolutely huge. So let me read you a little bit. It's from the little book I got here. I read a lot of stuff out of this one here. This one's good. All right, so let's see here. So this is leading up. All right. So after the Giants defeated the Dayton Triangles, the video I did last night, they defeated the Dayton Triangles 23-0 to go to 7-3. Giants lost their first 3 games, won their next 7 games. They defeated the Dayton Triangles 23-0. Now the Giants are 7-3. So the Giants defeated the Triangles for the Dayton Triangles for the 7th straight victory after 3 losses. But everyone was thinking and talking about the galloping ghost, Red Grange. More than $45,000 in the red, meaning more than 45. He lost more than $45,000 in 10 games. Tim Mara was very close to selling his franchise. Very close. I mean, as I said, if Red Grange never came in with this game, who knows? Who knows? However, the one thing was, okay, the one problem was Mara was very close to selling his franchise. The only trouble, he said years later, was where were you going to find anyone crazy enough to buy it? I mean, so basically, he's got a good point there. It's like, I'm going to sell you the team, right? We just lost $300 trillion last year. You want to buy the team? No, you really don't? No? Yeah, I mean, we lost all this money. No, you should. I mean, so who's going to be stupid enough to buy a team that lost $50,000, right? So he might have had a hard time selling the team, but he was thinking about it. He was really thinking about getting rid of the Giants, getting rid of the team. He had put together an attractive and winning football team, and the New Yorkers had not supported it. Now, if Red Grange couldn't attract New York fans, he knew he was saddled to a loser. So Red Grange was like Jesus Christ back then. I mean, he was huge. So if he knew Red Grange couldn't draw fans in, forget about it, right? Despite a rain that fell throughout most of the week, the tickets sold faster than the Giants could print them. On the first day, they sold 15,000. Over the next 2 days, they sold 25,000 more. By Thursday, all 3,482 box seats had been sold, and 100 sports writers from Albany to Chicago and Cleveland had wired ahead for credentials. For the first time in history, professional football was receiving page one treatment in big city papers and magazines. Every place Grange went, fans swarmed out to see him. In his first game as a professional against the Chicago Cardinals on Thanksgiving Day, that was obviously back in November, but he drew a capacity crowd of 36,000, then followed that with 8,000 in a blizzard in St. Louis and 35,000 people in Philadelphia. His next stop, the Polo Grounds. Now, keep in mind, this is December 6th. December 5th, they played in Philadelphia against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. So they played back-to-back games. And I'm going to read you something else that's even more freaking crazy. Just goes to show you how insane it was back then. Giants had traveled to Philadelphia to watch Grange play against Frankfurt, and on their train back, Bob Falwell, their coach, predicted the Giants would win 2 touchdowns to 1. The day before the game, New York was a slight 6-5 favorite. Mara, who had stubbornly refused to jump prices for the Bear game, remained calm as rain continued throughout Saturday. It was still pouring when Mara went to bed a little after midnight. Early Sunday morning, the phone rang. It was an associate. "Tim," he said, "I know it's early, but just take a look outside of your window." Groggy, Mara stumbled toward the window, pulled up the shade, and smiled. "That was the most beautiful sky I ever saw," he said. "It must be the luck of the Irish." To who knew him well, it was also the luck of Mara, which would guide him through many a sunny Sunday in his years as owner of the Giants. "Pop used to give tickets to Wellington and me to give out at school," said John Mara. "At first, no one knew what team we were talking about. Most of the time, we couldn't get our friends to go even if we gave them a dozen free tickets. But the Grange game, that was different. Everyone wanted to see Grange. By noon, the 2,500 special police assigned to handle the crowds lost control of the mob pushing up 8th Avenue outside the Polo Grounds. Spectators darted out from behind pillars and hawked tickets for 3 or 4 times the regular price. By 1 o'clock, nearly 70,000 people jammed the upper and lower stands, filling the stairways, bracing against the rafters, and spilling out onto the emergency stands set up in the end zones and along the sidelines. People were freaking everywhere. Multicolored bunting and pennants of red, blue, and orange and black snapped in the wind as 2 hands entertained in a pregame concert. Finally, 10 minutes before 2, Mara cleared the bands and spectators off the field. As the bands blared, "Hail, hail," and the gang's all here, the orange and black shirted Bears clomped down the stairs leading from the center field dressing room. Grange, his red hair and number 77 highlighted by the sun, ran a few steps on the muddy field and suddenly was engulfed by 24 photographers. This is funny. "I'll have to sue that bum," said Babe Ruth, watching from a lower box. They're my photographers. So even Babe Ruth was there. I mean, this game was absolutely freaking huge. Unbelievable. Now, this is just goes to show you how crazy some of the things were back then. Grange made his NFL debut, the Bears on Thanksgiving Day against the Chicago Cardinals. Now, the Giants also played Thanksgiving Day too, but they played against the Staten Island Stapletons, who were not part of the NFL. So the Giants, the Staten Island Stapletons weren't part of the NFL until 1929, from 1929, 30, 31, and 32 for 4 seasons. But the Giants did play on Thanksgiving Day. It just was not against another NFL team. An estimated 40,000 people attended and ended in a scoreless tie. In the next game, the Columbus Tigers, Grange threw a touchdown passes. The Bears won 14-13. Shortly after, the Bears signed Grange, Illinois teammate Earl Britton. Now, this is where it's just freaking. This is between NFL games and exhibition games against other teams, not NFL teams. But and once again, a lot of these guys played 60 minutes. Grange didn't. But a lot of the other guys, 60 minutes, offense, defense. Between December 2nd and December 13th, so basically you got like 11 days, 12 days, whatever it is, the Bears played an astounding 8 games. 8 freaking games in like 11 days. As I said, the day, December 6th, they played the Giants. December 5th, they played the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets in Philadelphia. Let's see here. And during which the team lived in a special railway car with its women's restroom converted into a makeshift training room. First game was against the Donnelly All-Stars, a team sponsored by a local mortician at Sportsman Park in St. Louis. The Bears won 39-6, though only 8,000 people attended due to poor weather and being played on a Wednesday. But I think they were talking about like blizzard conditions, and it was played on a Wednesday too. This was followed by a 2-touchdown performance day by Grange, including the game winner in a 14-7 defeat over the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. Immediately after the Yellow Jackets game, the Bears boarded the train for New York. Still wearing their dirty uniforms when the players noticed their gear, Pyle told Hallis, "This tour will make you so wealthy, Hallis, that next year you'll be able to afford 2 sets of uniforms." On December 6th, Grange and the Bears played the New York Giants at the Polo Grounds. Giants owner Tim Maurer had attempted to sign Grange, and after that failed, he instead secured a game with the Bears. Although the Giants lost 19-7, the game attracted nearly 70,000 fans and saved the team from financial ruin. Let's see here. Now he also got injured here too. Despite the victories, the demanding schedule led to increase in injuries, including Grange, who was hit in his left arm during the Giants game, causing it to swell by the team's next game against the Providence Steamroller in Boston. The pain from the injury was too much for Grange, who struggled to return a punt and allowed it to sail over his head. In addition to allowing a safety, the Bears wind up winning anyway in that game. But let's see. Played and killed them out literally, of course. See, Grange missed the following game as well against the lowly Detroit Panthers after a blood clot developed in his arm. Nevertheless, he joined his teammates at the stadium and was greeted by fans at halftime. Let's see here. And the Giants' final game of the season, they played one more game after this, was against the Bears in Chicago. On December 13th, a week later, this is December 6th, a week later, Sunday, December 13th, the Giants' final game of the season against the Bears in Chicago, right? On December 13th, the Bears returned to Chicago to host the Giants. But with Grange still out, the Giants wound up winning, but Grange was out because he was still injured. Many canceled their ticket reservations, and only 18,000 watched as the Bears lost 9-0. No other team before or since has ever attempted such a grueling schedule as the 1925 Bears, and I'm sure never will. Absolutely not. Grange wrote in his 1953 autobiography, Grange had some success in this season, scoring 3 touchdowns. But, just absolutely crazy. From like this, was it December 2nd to the 13th? They played like 8 games. Are you kidding me? But let me go to show you here. I got it here somewhere. Goes to show you. Now, these are the games that out of the 8 games from December 2nd to the 13th, Grange played in 5 games. Because remember, the Giant game he got injured in. So the next 3 games out of that 8 games, he didn't play because he had like a blood clot in his arm. I don't know what happened to him, but and I'm going to show you another little, he had something wrong with his arm, a blood clot or something like that. However, that is absolutely minuscule compared to this next article I'm going to read to you. All right, but let me get this one down here first. Here, Red Grange in 11 days, 5 games. Red Grange gets $82,000 in 11 days. $16,000 a game is his average as a pro. He was owed. He was like he made like almost like half the amount of money that came in. I mean, let's see. He earned $15,000 against Chicago, $12,000 against Chicago on the 29th against the St. Louis team, which was like a traveling team or whatever it was. They weren't a professional team. Against St. Louis, he only made $5,000 because there was only 8,000 people in attendance. Against the Yellow Jackets, he made $20,000. Against the Giants, he made $30,000. So back in 1925, he made $50,000 in 2 games, Saturday and Sunday. The 5th and the 6th, he made $50,000 based on the ticket sales. Let's see. And for the 11 days he has been a pro, he has averaged close to $7,500 per day. Of course, a certain percentage of his earnings go to his manager, CC Pile, which is cash and carry pile. But it is certain that the famous ghost already has made enough to give him more than a little worry when it comes to making out his income tax. Grange the Pro has played to approximately 181,000 persons so far in 5 games. A total that is identical with the number that saw him in action in his first varsity year at Illinois. During his college career of 3 years, he played before 738,000 persons, the number this year being 371,000 in the 5 games as a pro. His first 5 games as a pro, because remember, he got hurt in the Giants and he missed time after that. So his first 5 games, 2 were in Chicago, 1 game in St. Louis, Philadelphia, and New York. The Bears won 4 and tied in one of those games. So just simply amazing. He was so popular that he could just demand his manager, CC Pile, cash and carry Pile, could go in and demand certain things. If you want my guy, right, this is what we demand. Actually, he went a little overboard. He actually tried to get the Bears to give him like a certain percentage ownership of the team, and they told him no. So he came. They went back and forth, and basically they settled on like he would get like a certain percentage of the money from the ticket sales, and he made $82,000 in 5 games, which was, I mean, you can get whole teams put together and get up their whole salary for like a year. You could probably put the rest of the NFL together, all the other players possibly together in 1925, add up all their salaries, and you might have about 82,000, might have maybe a little more than that, but that's all the other 20 teams combined. I mean, 5 games, $82,000, freaking crazy. I mean, the guy was just unbelievable. But let's, as I said, I mentioned, let's talk, his injured. He got injured after 5 games, right? Well, let's read this here, right? This will bring you, put things in perspective here. This is what happened back then in 1925. Pro football player dies on field of a broken neck in Philadelphia, December 6th. So basically, it's December 6th. So this happened. Yeah, this happened the same day that the Giants played the Bears. This happened in Philadelphia. Same day the Giants played the Bears. Paul McConville, a member of the Frankfurt Panthers, a professional football team, probably like wasn't part of the NFL. There was many different leagues that out there, but they weren't part of the NFL. But the Frankfurt Panthers, a professional football team, had his neck broken today while playing against the Somerdale Athletic Association and died before reaching a hospital. McConville was hurt in the first quarter when he brought down a runner with a flying tackle. Several other players piled on top of them, and when they were untangled, McConville remained on the ground. He was carried unconscious to the sidelines, and when first aid failed, a hospital ambulance was summoned. Physicians said he had been killed almost immediately. So somehow, I don't know how he made a tackle or what he did. No freaking idea. His neck was broken, and he died almost instantly on the field. Unbelievable. I mean, you hear people, like DeMar Hamlin and all of that have maybe something wrong with his heart or whatever like that. Obviously, that is freaking scary as could all possibly be, right? But, we don't hear of anybody getting their neck broken, right? Maybe somebody gets a neck problem or something like that. And if we do get somebody with maybe a neck problem or something like that, they're not dying from it. And they're certainly not dying right on the field. We've certainly had some people, right, who got paralyzed, unfortunately, right? But they haven't necessarily died right on the field. So, I mean, just absolutely horrible. But stuff like that happened. Stuff like that happened back then in the day. All right, so as I said, so we got this game. Needless to say, this game was absolutely huge. The Giants didn't need it for like a championship or anything like that. The Giants had 3 losses. They weren't going. It didn't matter if they won this game or not because the Chicago Cardinals wound up winning. The Chicago Cardinals had the best overall winning percentage. The Chicago Cardinals won the 1925 championship. So, but the Giants needed this. They needed those fans and the people and all that stuff to basically save the organization, save the team. They might have had to go under if it wasn't for this one game. So, all right. So let's go. Let's start reading some articles here, shall we? All right. Okay. Let's see here. 70,000 see Grange in his pro debut. Famous Red Grange leads the Chicago Bears to a victory over the Giants by a score of 19-7. His share was about $30,000. Crowd is the greatest ever to attend a pro game and all shout for the hero. He advances the ball for a grand total of 128 yards. Greatest single thrill comes when 77 nabs pass and runs 35 yards for a score. He picked off a pass and he scored a touchdown. The Giants were down 12-7. He picked off a pass, and I guess it was in the fourth quarter. We'll find out. And he ran it back 35 yards for a touchdown to make the final score 19-7. So he gave the fans a thrill. Let's see here. How Grange earned his $30,000. So he played all of one quarter and parts of 2 other. So, I mean, so he played all of one quarter, and he was only in there for like parts of a couple other quarters. So he basically was on the sideline almost the whole game. Almost half the game he was on the sideline. Meanwhile, other players who making maybe $50, maybe $100 are playing 60 minutes. He's sitting on the sideline drinking Kool-Aid for half the game, making $30,000. He gained 53 yards on 11 plays from scrimmage. He ran back 2 kicks for a grand total of 13 yards. He threw 3 forward passes, 2 of which were completed for a total gain of 32 yards. He received 1 forward pass for a gain of 23 yards, and he intercepted 1 forward pass and ran it back 35 yards for a touchdown. And as I said, he only played about half the game. Out of the little Midwestern town came a fiery-haired youth who took the big city by storm. The largest crowd that ever witnessed a professional football game swarmed into the Polo Grounds yesterday to see the far-famed Red Grange in action. It was the first appearance for the Galloping Ghost in this city, and the 70,000 made their way to Harlem, streamed into the stadium that lies below Coogan's Bluff, and finally saw the Red Rover lead the Chicago Bears to a 1987 victory over their own New York Giants. I bet you a lot of people there, from New York were pulling for Red Grange, and they probably weren't up. Probably many of them probably weren't upset in the least that Red Grange and the Bears wound up winning. High honors have been heaped on the bright brow of this college football star who turned financier, but none could have attested to his popularity as did the outpouring of New York citizenry. Seldom, if ever before, has the Polo Grounds, where practically every sport but polo has been staged, accommodated so many persons. There was just so many tickets, and they were all bought, every ticket. But that didn't stop the overflow that wedged into the vacant corners, flooded down the aisles, and packed themselves in 2 and 3 deep along the rear railings, while hundreds spilled over onto the sidelines. Had the Chicago Bears played the New York Giants without Red Grange among those on the field, it would have been just another professional football game. Yep. But with the redhead to be seen in action, it was a spectacle that attracted spectators from almost every walk of life. And the Iceman delivered. Despite the slippery footing of the water-soaked field, he plunged through the line for repeated gains. He hurled passes into waiting arms for further advances. He snatched the ball out of the air while the Giants swarmed around him. And finally, to cap the climax, he intercepted a forward pass in the closing period and streaked down the sideline for 35 yards and a touchdown. His share was $30,000. There was more than glory and victory in his accomplishments. However, for some $30,000 was added to his rapidly growing bankroll. Altogether, Grange advanced the ball either directly or indirectly 128 yards at the rate of reported payment. The turf on the Polo Grounds was worth approximately $230 a yard. Wow, which makes it even more valuable than Florida real estate. The New York Exhibition Company probably never realized the value of its holding until Red Grange came to town. I mean, it was just absolutely unbelievable. Okay, here we go. All right, so there was never any doubt about what brought forth the great gathering. While Grange was in the game, the spectators strained forward eagerly, watching every move he made, waiting for him to break loose from the alert and watchful Giants for one of his famous twisting, squirming runs. They yelled for Grange to get away, and they yelled for the Giants to stop him. Every time the ball was snapped into the Chicago backfield, the throng half arose with the shouts of, "There he goes!" If a big white 77 showed on the back of a runner, they stood up and kept on yelling. If any other number showed, they settled back down again. So they looked to see, was it 77? If it was, they all stood up. If it wasn't, When Grange left the contest in the middle of the second period, the thousands watched only with half interest. When he failed to appear at any time in the third quarter, an atmosphere of lassitude swept over the stands. And when the final period started with the main attraction still on the sideline, the inevitable chant went up from the bleachers. Gathered forces as it was taken up by those in the reserve seats and echoed across the field. "We want Grange. We want Grange." Simply amazing. We want Grange. They're there to watch the New York Giants play the Bears, and everybody wants to see a guy from the Chicago Bears play. His return restores the thrill. Then Grange came back. Once more, excitement and the thrill that the crowd came to get was in the atmosphere, and once more the spectators leaned forward in eager anticipation. Their hopes, dreams, and desires were fulfilled shortly after the last quarter began. Now, remember, somewhere along the line in this game, he got hit in the left arm. A kick, pump, who knows? But something happened to his left arm, and he got injured. And apparently, somewhere along the line, some type of blood clot formed in his arm. So the Giants, trailing by 6 points in the fourth quarter, were struggling desperately, almost frantically, to keep their winning streak, and had reached 7 successive victories. A moment before, they had found themselves in the shadow of their own goal post, forced there by Grange's plunges and passes, and they had managed to shake off those dread symbols of danger that rose white and glaring behind them by a frantic forward pass. But they passed once too often. The next time they hurled the ball into the air, the tall, lean, knock-kneed figure of Red Rover flashed across the turf, splashed through a puddle, and leaped high in the air. His long arms clutched the ball, and he was off in the opposite direction, swinging smoothly where the going was rough, breaking into the open and sweeping on 35 yards to another touchdown for the Bears. That was one dash over the mud-caked field was enough to satisfy the throng. That one scamper gave them what they came to say. That one sight of the modern mercury of the gridiron made old men, young boys, and bright-eyed ladies turn to each other and pronounce Grange all that he had been painted. It also cut off the last chance for the New York victory, but nobody seemed to care about that. They all had come to see the Phantom in action, and they were satisfied. Grange is not to be blamed for remaining on the sidelines during the third and part of the second periods. He has played 6 football games in the last 15 days, and he still has contests scheduled for Washington, Boston, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Chicago before next Sunday night. I mean, crazy schedule. The way to a fortune in football may not be long, but it is extremely exhausting, even for an Iceman. It is estimated that in his 5 games as a member of the salaried brigade, Grange has accumulated something around $82,000. Grange and Charlie Pyle, which is manager, or CC Pyle, cash and carry Pyle, both refuse to give out any figures, and all that his teammates will say when Grange's share of the gate receipts is discussed is he gets plenty. His income tax report will at least prove interesting. The thousands began assembling in the home of the Giants baseball and football the minute that the gates for the bleacher tickets were thrown open. The first rush came from a swarm of small boys who had waited long to gain admission and a point of vantage for the game. Red Grange, to most of them, meant more than President Coolidge, perhaps. Babe Ruth was better known, but even that is questionable. The bleachers filled in a flash, and then the steady stream of reserved seat ticket holders started pouring in. Gradually, the great stands filled. An hour before the game, long human lines led to every entrance gate, and an hour after the game started, there still was a steady swarm of spectators finding their way to their seats. Whew. It was just unbelievable. I mean, just simply amazing. All right, so we got another one here. It says 70,000 people see Grange's Bears win, 19-7. I mean, there's a picture here. It just shows you. I mean, there's not one empty seat. Nobody's gone to the bathroom. Absolutely nothing. I mean, absolutely not. Just simply unbelievable. It says Red intercepts a pass, runs 35 yards for a touchdown. For 3.5 periods at the humanity-stuffed Polo Grounds yesterday, the Metropolitan debut of football's captain and industry was one of the most distinct social and financial successes that New York has ever experienced. But there was something lacking in an artistic way. Approximately 70,000 pried themselves into the flag-decked stadium to see with their own eyes Harold Grange, the very professional ex-student, ex-Iceman, rip the line of the New York's own Giants, to see him wriggle and dart and shimmy his hips for a lengthy run, to see if this famous all that he has cracked up the bait. This article is very, very light. It's tough to see some of this here. They wanted Red. This is very hard to say. Wow. For 1.5 periods, the crowd had seen him throw 2 forward passes, receive 1, make a few short but not sensational gains. And so when the 4th period started and the so-called galloping ghost was still missing from the Bears lineup after having been relieved in the second, and a half angry, half good-natured cry was taken up by the entire 70,000 people. We want Grange. We want Grange. Mighty and echoing, it rolled from the stands and reverberated across the field. Razzes for Red. A few plays in the 4th, and a sturdy youth with a large black 77 on his yellow jersey loped from the sidelines and jolted the other yellow-clad athletes. It was the illustrious Harold Grange back again. Now, What is the psychology of the mob, football or otherwise? The cries which smacked of joy as soon as the famous 77 was first spied by the multitude now turned to a chorus of raucous boos. Grange gained 4 yards against the Giants. He was smeared for a loss, but by then he winged the ball through the crisp December air and into the waiting arms of Joe Sterneman for a gain of 28 yards. That's the stuff. This is something like it, chuckled the crowd. The Bears now were within a few feet of the Giants' goal. Crash. Grange had gained 3 yards. Let's see here. Wiggling and squirming through the bulwarks of the Giants. Another audible plunge, and 77 was picked up after annexing another yard, but he had failed to make a touchdown or even a first down, and the ball was within 1.5 yards of the goal. The Giants extricated themselves from the predicament when Lynn Bomar plucked a forward pass from the air and goodly distance from the goalposts. Red's big moment. The Giants resorted again to the pass. The oval rose gracefully from the arm of Mike Palm and was drifting toward the south sideline. Lurking there, unnoticed by any of the Giants, was the famous 77. He leaped. The ball was clutched beneath his arms. He took off like a deer harassed. Straight down the field, he ran like a demon possessed. I love the way they explain this stuff. 35 yards was scorched by his twinkling feet, and the mighty Ren Grange had made a touchdown. No one along his route to molest him. No one to duck and dodge or stiff arm. No chance to exercise his famous Charleston hips. A clear field and away he went, each step throwing the cheering stands into greater turmoil. Red Grange had done his stuff. No, perhaps it was not a typical Red Grange party. No doubt too much was expected. One boy, 22 years old, cannot always carry a 3-ring circus under his right arm. But the dim of the crowd unmistakably meant that it was satisfied. The Giants' winning streak of 7 games was wrecked yesterday by Joe Sterneman, who made a touchdown just a few minutes after the game started. In the same period, Grange, let's see here, received a long pass from Larry Walquist. Grange heaved a good pass to Walquist, and this same Joe Sterneman, just a little fella, ran back and across 10 yards for a touchdown. It was in the second period that Phil White crossed the Bears line. White and McBride had carried the ball to the 3-yard line, and White was designated to score a touchdown. He did amid much jostling and bucking. They did their best. Century Milstead, Lynn Bomar, Mike Palm, Hinkie Haynes, Jack McBride, and the other Giants tried their best, but they were up against a formidable set of youths and Harold Grange. Late into the night, C.C. Pyle, Cash and Carry Pyle, Grange's manager, known as Cash and Carry Pyle, counted up the ex-Iceman's earnings on a New York Sabbath. It was rumored that Grange received close to $30,000 for his cut. Whew. I mean, there's actually there are other. Let's see here if I can read this here. All right, so we got this is for the Chicago Bears. This is their lineup. Haney was their left end. Healy was their left tackle. Anderson was their left guard. Trafton was their center. McMillan was their right guard. Murray was their right tackle. George Hallis was their right end. Sterneman was their quarterback. Red Grange was the left halfback. Walquist was their right halfback. And Sterneman was their, they had 2 Sternemans, Jay Sterneman and E. Sterneman. So E. Sterneman was the fullback. Jay Sterneman was the quarterback. For the Giants, Jappy was the left end. Milstead was the left tackle. Carney was the left guard. Doc Alexander was the center. He would be the Giants head coach in 1926. Williams was the Giants right guard. Parnell was the right tackle. Bomar was the right end. Palm was the quarterback. Hinkie Haynes was the left halfback. Benkert was the right halfback, and McBride was the fullback. So let's see, substitutes. The Giants had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 substitutes they had. The Bears had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They had 11 substitutes. A lot of substitutes they had. But, it just goes to show you it was, just absolute. I mean, if you look at this, there's a picture. It's just absolute mob scene, people. But it was meant that the amount of money that they made, right? That even giving Red Grange like $30,000, the amount of money they made was like well over $100,000 was made. So they gave the Red Grange 30. The Bears were guaranteed like 2,500, maybe 5,000, somewhere around there. And all the rest was Tim Mara's. So he paid his players, and then he whatever $45,000 or so, whatever he was in debt, he wiped that out, and he actually came out with a surplus. And the Giants wound up playing one more game after this, which would be the following week in Chicago. But as I said, Red Grange was injured. He got injured in this Giants game, and he would miss some time. But I mean, it just goes to show you, I mean, they played like 11 days or so. They played like 8 games, 11, 12 days, 8 games. It was crazy playing back-to-back games, and just as I was saying is that Red Grange, he only played like part of the game. He played offense and defense, but he only played like maybe half the game, and he still got all that money. Meanwhile, other players are playing like 60 minutes, and they might have made maybe $50, maybe $100. Meanwhile, he's making $30,000 for just playing like maybe half the game or so. But this one game here was absolutely huge, and quite possibly saved the New York Football Giants franchise. As I said, because with Tim Mara, he said it was maybe about $45,000, maybe a little more, maybe a little bit less in debt into this game. And if he lost money, as I was reading, if Red Grange was not there, this was just another football game. And who knows, the Giants might have lost money in this game. After this week and the next week, Giants might have been down maybe $50,000. Was Tim Mara going to continue to keep losing $50,000 every season? But his problem was like, who was going to buy the team? Right? He might have to just turn it back into the NFL. Who knows? But I said this one game here on December 6th, 1925, quite possibly saved the New York Football Giants. Well, that wraps this up. I'll be back again with the my next video will be the final game of the 1925 season. That would be December 13th, 1925. But that's what happened on this date, December 6th, 1925, in New York Football Giants history. I'll see you next time.